Hi, so today I'm going to be discussing if the Nazis achieved Volksgemeinschaft. So, what I'm going to do is, like I did last time, I'm going to lay out my points, like the different aspects of Volksgemeinschaft, and then, like, at the end, like, do the actual, like, question structure. So first I'm going to, like, lay out all the aspects of Volksgemeinschaft. So first we have education. So did the Nazis successfully implement education under Volksgemeinschaft? So in schools, this is divided into two groups: in schools and then in universities. So first, schools. In 1933, they passed this like vetting of the textbooks, in which they ensured that the textbooks were according to Nazi ideals. In 1933, they also passed, as you know, the law for the reestablishment of a professional civil service, in which many teachers were dismissed on racial and political grounds. Then, 1935, the Ministry of Education issued central directives as to where education should be going. Then, in 1937, 97% of teachers belonged to the National Socialist Teachers League, the NSLB. In 1938, some rules were published that stated what would be covered in the school year and in most subjects. And for example, in most subjects, in geography, they did Lebensraum and blood and soil. In history, they did the hatred of the Treaty of Versailles, the First World War, but as in Germans were winning, the Franco-Prussian War, in which the Germans won, and really, they painted either only wars in which Germany won, or they painted it as in, look, Germany is the greatest. In physical education, they did military drills, competition in strength, boxing, and PE was actually 15% of the curriculum. In terms of culture, they had this study of Nordic sagas, because this idea of Aryanism, I guess, comes from Nordic countries. So of course they had to study Nordic sagas, as well as this idea of the consciousness of being. In biology, they study eugenics and really a stress on social Darwinism and this stress on race and heredity. Then in religion, it was put off the curriculum. They didn't really teach religion, but instead of teaching religion per se, they taught the Hitler myth. And in language, they had a lot of stress on German. So that's schools. Then universities. Well, students if you wanted to go to university, you had to do 4 months of labor service and 2 months in the in an SA camp. 25% of students actually avoided joining the German Students' League. So only 75% joined, which is kind of impressive. Then, November 1933, all the university staff had to sign this declaration in support of Hitler and the National Socialist State. Then the law for the reestablishment of the professional civil service, 1933. Well, 1,200 teachers were dismissed, so 1,200, and this 1,200 university staff was a total of it was around the 15% of all the university staff dismissed on, again, racial and political grounds. Then only 1.5% of all university population was Jewish, and only 10% of German girls went to university. And the access to higher education was strictly rationed and not really encouraged. So, did the Nazis successfully implement Volksgemeinschaft in education? Well, I'd argue that they did. They passed many laws, and they really restricted the access to not only education but also higher education. Many teachers were dismissed. 15% at universities. They also made them join leagues like the National Socialist Teachers League. 97% of teachers joined, and then the German Students' League. 75% of students joined. So it was really successful. It wasn't 100% successful, but in terms of this question, I definitely argued that in terms of education, the Nazis definitely achieved Volksgemeinschaft. So, next area, youth groups in Nazi Germany. First, we have, there's two groups, the Hitler Youth and the BDM. So, Hitler Youth. Well, the leader was von Schirach, and their motto was "Live faithfully, fight bravely, and die laughing," which is kind of creepy considering, like, not creepy, but I mean, there was just like 14-year-old boys being told to die laughing. Like, in their motto, they said the word like die. Then, by 1933, all other non-Nazi youth organizations had been banned. As well as 1936, this law for the incorporation of the German youth was passed, which like made official education movement equal in status and in status to schools, and really like established the Hitler Youth as a state organization. In 1936, there was now a new monopoly over sports facilities and children's competitions under the age of 14. So anyone under the age of 14, well, all the sports competitions handled by the Hitler Youth. Catholic youth organizations were banned, like I said before. And well, by 1939, so by the time war broke out, well, the membership was compulsory. You had to join the Hitler Youth. And this Hitler Youth aimed to indoctrinate young boys, especially because Hitler Youth was a boy organization, both physically and politically. Boys from the age of 10 were prepared to be warriors. At the age of 10. They had to swear a personal oath of allegiance to the Fuhrer. Like 10 to 14-year-old boys being made to swear an oath of allegiance. I mean, it's crazy. They also taught Nazi songs and were encouraged to read Nazi pamphlets. And well, they saw these opportunities to participate in sports and to go camping and these kinds of things as a plus. Like, come here, have fun with us. You're gonna have a lot of fun. Yes, you're gonna politically and physically indoctrinate you, but hey, you're gonna go camping with your friends. Then, well, as the time went on, membership declined. Well, because I mean, the youth were starting to feel like really restrained. They couldn't really, it's just like camp and sports and fight bravely. They had enough, so membership declined until it was compulsory. To a point in which, well, they became claustrophobic. They thought their freedoms were being taken away. Well, like this idea of struggle, sacrifice, loyalty, and discipline became the daily norm. In 1933, the Hitler Youth had 100,000 members, and by 1936, official figures claimed that the Hitler Youth had a whopping 8.75 million members. In reality, this was still 4 million, which, I mean, it's still impressive, but not the 8.75 million that they claimed. Then we have the BDM, their leader being Jutta Rudiger, who, by the way, was a lesbian, which goes against the hypocrisy of a Nazi racial state. Anyway, their motto was "Be faithful." So both the Hitler Youth and the BDM had the faithful word in their mottos. So be faithful, be pure, be German. It was, like I said, the female equivalent of the Hitler Youth, and instead of preparing them as, as like soldiers like the boys, they were now prepared for being housewives and mothers under this idea of Volksgemeinschaft. Well, this idea of blood and soil was also promoted in German young girls, and it was like this idea that it was really important to marry a German man was really stressed and put onto them. They had to marry a German man because he was the only one who could spread the Aryan genes. Well, they were told their duties were to keep their bodies healthy because you had to produce healthy children that would belong to the Fuhrer. So they had to take care of themselves. Like with the Hitler Youth, their membership was made compulsory by 1939. And, well, things they did range from dancing, group gymnastics, hygiene, healthy eating, summer camps, physical exercise, route marches, flag waving, saluting, faith and beauty groups, baby care, ballroom dancing. I mean, not really what a young girl should be doing. So, that begs the question, did the Nazis succeed in achieving Volksgemeinschaft for young people? I'd argue yes, but less so than for education, because, well, I mean, membership was like quite high, and there was indoctrination and all, but they also had to count opposition. Because I'm not really going to talk about opposition because that would take me ages, but in terms of young people, well, and education for that matter, education, the White Rose, especially for university, young people are singing jazz groups, the Edelweiss Pirates, which like they ridiculed to the youth members. So I'd argue that in terms of young people, it was mostly successful at implementing Volksgemeinschaft, but not 100%, not like in education. In education, and especially with universities, it was less successful than in schools, but I would argue that it was successful in here, also that it was successful. Then, Nazi policies towards the workers. So, well, let's talk about the German labor front. So I'm going to divide it into positive changes for the workers, negative changes for the workers, and neutral changes, I guess. So, the German labor front, the DAF, it eventually built up this huge, enormous business empire, including banks, housing associations, construction companies, the Volkswagen plants. It had its own travel company. And by 1939, it had around 44,500 employees, which is extremely impressive. Yes, it was, trade unions had been banned, but hey, 44,000, membership wasn't obligatory. It's quite a high number. In 1936, it began offering these new vocational training courses. Official figures state that 2.5 million workers attended these courses. Again, quite successful numbers. And by 1936, the average wage of a worker was around 35 marks per week, which was, in fact, 10 times as much money 6 million people had relied on back in 1932. That's all the positive changes towards the workers and positive policies now of the DAF, obviously. Now I'm going to talk about the negative ones. So, it was established in May 1933 under the leadership of Robert Ley, and it really took over the assets of the banned trade unions and became the largest single organization in the Third Reich, the DAF. It had, inside the DAF, there was its own propaganda wing in which they promoted the message that people's hard work and difficult conditions would not be rewarded with material gain, but rather with this satisfaction that they would be serving the Reich, they would be serving Hitler, serving the glorious Führer. Anyway, it was like I said, it replaced trade unions, but it didn't really function as one. It didn't bring about any changes for the workers. It wasn't involved in influencing government policy. It wasn't involved in bargaining for wages. Not really functioning as a trade union. Instead, it included the Reich Labor Service. So the RAD. And in 1935, it obliged all men aged between 19 and 25 to complete 6 months of national service. It's like working far away, agricultural labor, public works, often far away from home, and they did pay them, but the pay was extremely low. And it's this idea of blood and soul. You have to be close to the soul to really feel it's beauty go through you. That kind of stuff. The members of the DAF It did include both employers and employees. However, well, it was heavily weighted towards the rights and therefore securing the rights of the employers. So, well, it didn't really help workers, not like in trade unions. So, any neutral changes? Well, it was really the only official body representing workers. I mean, there were unofficial ones, but again, not really successful. Because I think it probably got banned. And well, membership wasn't obligatory, and I mean, it was popular. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was popular. Membership wasn't compulsory, but it was appealing. And by 1939, they had a whopping 35 million members, the DAF, and had two aims to not only increase production but to incorporate workers into Volksgemeinschaft. So, inside the DAF, there were two main organizations that I'd like to mention, the Strength Through Joy and the Beauty of Work. So, first of all, the Strength Through Joy, or the KDF. So again, I'm going to talk about the positive and the negatives and the neutral. So, positive changes for the workers. Well, it was an arm of the DAF, really designed to allow workers to gain strength for their work by experiencing leisure time, by having little vacations, enjoying themselves outside of work, because why not? Well, it had subsidized holidays abroad, and I mean, it's definitely not like this. Like, this is my own analogy, but I like to imagine the KDF as a sort of Disney, like evil Disney, like cruise ship, because they did offer cruise ships which included literally everything. Like, it was cruises to film in Norway, Bulgaria, Turkey, Libya, sporting activities, hikes, trips to the opera, theater, cinema. And I just like to imagine, like, I mean, it's definitely not like this, like, never use this, but a Minnie Mouse cruise ship, and instead of a Minnie Mouse, a swastika in the middle. And its aim, what it put across, was that they wanted this new spirit of social equality, because, well, all activities that were organized on these cruise ships and these hikes were of a one-class basis. These cruise ships were not only made like because workers enjoy themselves, but also to show off the technological advancement of Nazi Germany. So say you live in Norway and you live in the coast and you're just like chilling, you're like relaxing, nothing's really happening, but then you see a boat and like a Nazi boat walk by, sail by. And you're like, damn, they have a swimming pool, it's huge, looks like it's full of people. Shouldn't we go to the right? So in those countries they visited, it was just to show up how well they were treating their workers. And like the ships had, like I said, swimming pools, theaters, gyms. In 1930s, like nowadays, if a cruise ship doesn't have that, it's kind of lame. But back in the day, no one had ever done this before. So then they offered, like I said, new opportunities that had never existed by 1933. And because of this, they became insanely popular, even more popular than the DIF, like the main, like part of the DIF. They organized hikes. In 1938, 2 million people went on these hikes. These are according to official figures, by the way. 1938, 2 million people went on hikes. 7.5 million went to the theater. 8 million went on official KDF holidays. And 22 million took part in sports. I mean, everything comes with the bad side, so there were some negative things for the workers. So, for example, well, yes, the official purpose of this organization was to give the workers some free time, allow them to enjoy themselves outside of work. However, it was more to control the workers' free time, because if they didn't have free time, they didn't have time to just join any radical anti-Nazi associations. So by keeping all the workers on a cruise, on a hike, on the theater. They were no longer at SPD and so paid meetings, although SPD had been banned by this point. Yeah, these cruise ships were marketed to be like a one-class basis for the German worker. However, they were crazy expensive. Only 10% of the ship's passengers were from the working class. And in 1938, only 131,000 people went on a cruise. Like I said, 8 million officially took part in KDF holidays, but really in that same year, only 131,000 actually went on a cruise. The best cabins, because there's one like social class basis. It's all great and all, but the best cabins in these cruise ships were reserved for the Nazi, like high Nazi officials. So is there really one like class, social, like German? There's only one class, and that's the Aryan class, and there's nothing below. Not really, because the Nazis, like the high-ranking Nazis, had much better conditions in these cruise ships, for example. And in these ships, and this is why I like to imagine it's like an evil like Minnie Mouse cruise ship. Well, I've never been on one, but I'm guessing like there's like a bunch of activities, and then you can just like join which one, and there's like a schedule. And well, it's like that, but imagine SS officers and Gestapo members mingling around. Exactly like that. Life was extremely regimented. You had to wear suitable clothes. You couldn't have any romances. And the SS and the Gestapo were there, so you couldn't really relax. You couldn't really like grab a hammock or whatever, sit on the deck and say, "I don't like Hitler." You said that, and then I haven't heard of any cases, but I'm sure the SS members would have had no trouble just throwing you into the sea. So that's the negative changes for the workers. So the neutral changes. Well, it did attempt to bring Germans from all the different regions of Germany, be that Dresden, Weimar, Berlin, Munich, all different parts of Germany into one, to like force this new national identity. So will no longer be people of Berlin mingling with people of Berlin, or people of Dresden mingling with people of Dresden. It would be just Germans and Germans from whatever part of Germany you are. Well, the KDF was the organization responsible for the Volkswagen savings scheme. The Volkswagen savings scheme really was amazing for the German worker. It offered this new Beetle, like Volkswagen Beetle. You only had to do was save 5 marks a week, and then you had to reach like 950 marks, and you could buy a car. Simple as that. However, no one who participated in this scheme actually got a car, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, and that is the KDF. Then there's the final one, that is the beauty of work, and that's the SDA. There's a lot of letters. So DAF, German Labor Front. RAD, Right Labor Service. KDF, Strength Through Joy. And SDA, Beauty of Labor. I like to remember, so Strength Through Joy starts with an S. But it's not the same thing as the SDA that also starts with an S. I remember because it's not the same thing. Anyway, so it had some positive and negative and neutral changes, so I'm going to explain them now. The positive changes was that it was the only real organization to function as a trade union, because it campaigned for better working conditions. It really had better washing facilities, canteens. I think at one point, sporting grounds, tennis, not tennis court, but many places where you could play tennis or install a basket. They were the ones, the SDA were the ones who organized these improved conditions. However, that also had negative changes. Well, yes, you could have this, but all changes to the factory floor had to be done and paid for by the workers. So what they were doing was that, when they asked permission, hey, can we install can we paint the factory? it's great. Can we paint them, say, yellow? And the Nazi would be like, yeah, sure. But you're gonna have to buy the paint and you're gonna have to paint the actual factory walls. My job is to say you can do it. Literally that. Like, the workers have to literally do everything. And well, the neutral changes was that it was devoted to improving the working conditions and to secure the health and hygiene of the Aryan race. And according to official Nazi figures, which can't exactly be trusted, by 1938, more than 34,000 companies had improved working conditions for their employees under this SDA scheme, which cost 900 million Reichsmarks. Now, these figures are actually true. Well, it did cost 900 million Reichsmarks, but the Nazis didn't pay a single cent of it. It was all the workers. So, in terms of working class, were they successful in achieving Volksgemeinschaft? Well, they're a bit doubtful. I'm not entirely sure because there were some apparent good changes, but mostly it was terrible. And then you have to count in the opposition. So the SPD, the so paid, that's like the workers. The Harrow and Libertas with the red orchestra. That's also like workers with say what else? And Harrow and Libertas. That's pretty much the Harrow and Libertas and the SPD and the so paid. Those are the opposition groups to these policies, and I don't know how successful it was. I'm not entirely sure. So, next, the church. Again, I'm going to outline the church, which is kind of confusing, so bear with me, and then I'm going to assess it at the end. So, the Catholic Church. So, the key information, well, it was led by Pope Pius XI up until 1939, and then onwards Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII. So I like to remember because in 1939, that was when the war started, and the same year there was a switch over with the popes. Well, not switch over because Pope Pius died, the 11th. So the Catholic Church boasted of 6 archbishops in Germany, 19 bishops, and around 20,000 priests. And Catholicism was more present in the north and in the east, so Berlin, although there was still obviously Protestant influences. Then, if you like it to see the numbers, 22 million people in Germany were allegedly Catholic. That is 32% of the German population. They had youth organizations like 1.5, I can't think of any names, but they were 1.5 million members strong. They ran schools, they ran charities. A really notable member, which I'm going to talk more about him in a second, was von Galen. And, well, to their credit, they were harder to control because they had a loyalty to God and to the Pope, not really to Hitler. They also had political parties, like the Catholic Center parties, most notably, and I think, not most notably, they were in the 1920s, and they were really, really, really significant. They headed, I think, 3 out of the 6 coalitions in the 1920s. And, well, the Catholic Center Party really dissolved itself, but, yeah. And, well, I'm going to talk about this later in a second, but Pope Pius XI then published the pamphlet With Burning Grief, which I've said it once and I'll say it again. It's the most useless thing I've ever seen. Well, I haven't seen it, but I've ever heard of. So, what are the policies the Nazis had towards the Catholic Church? So, first, after 1935, 1936, public meetings were restricted. All newspapers were heavily censored. All Catholic newspapers were heavily censored. There was a propaganda campaign against corruption, and, well, the Catholic youth was beginning to lose its members because they were all flocking to the Hitler Youth and the BDM. In 1937, the Gestapo and the SS were instructed to be present in churches, be that in uniform or hidden, especially the Gestapo, they were hidden. And they tightened restrictions on press, propaganda, and they highlighted sex scandals. So I'm going to talk about this later. like 200 priests were involved in a huge scandal. And they also restricted pilgrimages and processions, and they closed monasteries. And yet another useless policy towards the church, not Nazi policy, but like church policy towards the church, was the signing of the Concordat in 1933. Now, evidence the Nazis succeeded in controlling the church. Well, they signed the Concordat on the 20th of July, 1933, which coincidentally is my birthday, but that's not really important. It's literally the most useless piece of paper I've ever heard of. So it's Hitler and Pope Pius XI, although it was negotiated by future Pius XII, said, "Hey, Catholic Church, I am not going to attack you because I know you have a really significant hold on society, but I need something in return. I need you to not tell the church, like people, to go against the Nazi regime." So the Catholic Church said, "Fine, we'll make a deal. We won't attack the church if you don't attack the Nazis, if you don't attack the church." And that was the deal. But only a fool would make a freaking deal with Hitler. And I get that in 1933 he was still like apparently trustworthy. But still, like, it's Hitler. You don't make this type of agreement with a politician. So the SA were actually ordered to attend the churches, like, along with the SS and the Gestapo, but this is 1933, no 1937. So Galen, von Galen, he was the Bishop of Munster, even thanked, he later turns against the regime, but in the beginning he thanked the Fuhrer for remilitarizing the Rhineland and even blessed Hitler. Then in 1937, well, you know how I said like 200 priests were involved in this huge scandal? Well, these 200 priests were put on trial for not only sex scandals, but also like currency trafficking offenses. In 1939, Cardinal Faulhaber, he ordered this huge celebration because it had been an attempt on Hitler's life. And Hitler obviously survived. So he ordered the Catholic Church had to celebrate Hitler's survival. And well, in 1940, the Catholic Church did welcome the attack on the USSR. However, the Nazis weren't entirely successful in controlling the church. So Nazism and Christianity, especially Roman Catholicism, had really opposite beliefs. In Bavaria, when you went in, instead of saying Heil Hitler, they would say God be with you, which seems insignificant, but they were still putting God before Hitler. Then, the war, so when the Second World War broke out, it really encouraged the people to turn back to their faith, to essentially be more religious, because in times of crisis, they will turn to a force created themselves, religion. Pope Pius the 11th, well, Nazis did attack the church, as you're going to see, like, especially in the right church. I'm going to get into that later. Well, Pope Pius the 11th was offended. He's like, "Dude, you promised not to attack the church." Hitler's like, "Whoopsies." So, my dear Pope Pius, he issued this public text called "With Burning Grief" to attack and criticize Nazi and their ideals. But it wasn't like to attack, physically attack, like criticize. And they were, it was like messengers went around, like spreading the pamphlet. And this is by the Catholic opposition. I think it was like not 6 different, but that's another thing now. So like messengers went around, it was really like passive opposition. And it's really the most useless stuff. So you have this authoritarian regime. This is 1937, around that time. This is an extremely authoritarian regime which has been present for over 3 years. And the best thing you can do is say, "Hey dude, you broke our agreement. You said you were not going to attack us. Why did you attack us? Guys, Catholic supporters, can you criticize the Nazis?" It was no real form of opposition. It was extremely, extremely useless. Extremely useless. And we'll see the point of the wood-burning grief. It's like Pope Pius XI's way of saying, "Oh my God, Hitler betrayed me. I'm so sad." It's literally that. So then another evidence showing that the Nazis failed in controlling the church was that von Galen, he preached several sermons criticizing Nazi ideologies, especially in 1941 with the whole T4 program, euthanasia. Hitler wasn't exactly pleased, and he tried to have von Galen imprisoned. However, the Pope, by this point being Pius XII, he said, "I'm going to protect this bishop von Galen," and he was too powerful in terms of the church hierarchy, so he was protected, and von Galen was safe. And well, they Nazis also banned crucifixes. And this ban of crucifixes caused outrage, understandably, in places like Bavaria. So, yeah. There was actual protest because of this. So, yeah, in terms of how successful were the Nazis in controlling the Catholic Church and therefore bringing it, not bringing it into Volksgemeinschaft, but like controlling the Catholic Church, I'd say not really. Moderately, kind of. You can argue it both ways. But von Galen was never attacked. They broke the Concordat, which was a point for them, and they put 200 priests on trial. That some members of the church celebrated them, like von Galen at the beginning, and then Cardinal Faulhaber shook in some newspapers. Yes, it was mostly controlled, but the fact that von Galen couldn't be touched, that's just like, really? You were not successful, bro. No. So then you have the Protestant, and inside the Protestant church is the Confessional Church. So a little bit of key information before I actually get into the Nazi policies. Well, Martin Niemöller and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think Niemöller dies later on, like he gets killed by the regime. They established the Pastors Emergency League in September 1933. Now, you can see September 1933, just months into Hitler's position as Chancellor of Germany. Von Galen and Bonhoeffer, Niemöller and Bonhoeffer, they didn't like the new Chancellor, and they were afraid that their position was threatened. Their position as like the Protestant Church was threatened. And then they would go on to establish the Confessional Church in 1935. They did so. More on the Reich Church later, but the Reich Church was from 1934. Like the idea of the Reich Church and the Confessional Church really broke away in 1935. The Protestant Church, the Protestant Church had 5,000 clergy, and their theology was based purely on the Bible, literally nothing else. And in opposition to the Reich Church, it was more present in the South and in the West. They made up 45 million people, so if you like numbers, 58% of the population, bringing the total amount of people that pertain both either to the Catholic or the Protestant religion to around, I think it was around 90. Around 90, and 10% were non-believers. They also had youth organizations, but not as prominent as the Catholic ones. And well, you can't really blame Protestantism for being so prominent in Nazi Germany, because Lutheranism, which was the thing that really started Protestantism, well, it did start in Germany, so the beginnings were there. Then also, the church was nationalist in nature, so the Nazis, if they had to choose, they would choose the Protestant church, and that's why the Reich Church is based on Protestant theology. So, what were some of the policies towards the church? In 1934, 2 Protestant bishops were arrested for some matter, but there was huge public outcry, and they were allowed back into the church, I guess, and they were released from prison. Then, I think, I don't know the year, but later on, 700 Prussian Protestant pastors were arrested. And I like to remember it as 700 PPP, because it's Prussian Protestant pastors. And they were arrested because they were condemning this new Nazi neo-paganism, and well, Hitler couldn't exactly have that, because how dare they condemn Nazi neo-paganism. And then, the Confessional Church was a direct defiance of Gleichschaltung, because, Gleichschaltung is this idea of a one-party state, one thing controlling everything, and there was a new Confessional Church not approved by the Nazis. No, thank you. And, the Confessional Church really exploited divisions in the church in Germany. It marginalized really Christians, and it was repression rather than anything else. So, evidence the Nazis succeeded in controlling the Protestant church. Well, the Reich Church was implemented to control Protestant churches, more on that later. And, like I said, 700 Prussian Protestant pastors were arrested for condemning Nazi neo-paganism. They also welcomed the attack on the USSR in 1940, and the SA were ordered to attend the church. In terms of Nazis failing to control the Protestant church was that, Nazis wanted to create this new idea of unified Protestant Reich Church. But it really failed because the Confessional Church broke away in 1935. Well, it was led by Martin Niemöller and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This church, not the 5,000 priests is not the Protestant church, it's the Confessional Church. Because it was made to resist Nazi interference in the church, because they saw what they had done with the Catholic Church, and they could not have that. And they boasted of this huge number of priests, like I said, 5,000. Which is more pastors rather than priests, because priests is Catholic, pastors is Protestant. And some rural areas, which you would think would be more traditional, actually went to the Confessional Church, because they wanted to celebrate their church festivals in the traditional way. So no swastikas. The swastikas are completely unnecessary. Why should we have them? So let's just have it a normal church celebration. So, did the Nazis succeed in controlling the Protestant church? I'd say so. I don't think there's any real opposition. I'd say so for the Protestant church. You have to take away the Confessional Church. So let me rephrase that. So apart from the Confessional Church, which was formed. Okay, no. Let me start again. They failed. I got confused. Sorry. They failed in controlling the Reich Church, the Protestant church. Sorry. So because of this separation of the Confessional Church from the Reich Church, they weren't able to keep them under control, and they broke away. So that's huge evidence saying that they really failed in controlling the church. So sorry about that. So far in the church, we know that they kind of failed in the Catholic Church, but they definitely failed in the Protestant Church. So now I'm going to get into the Reich Church. And this is really the Volksgemeinschaft tie here we have. So, the Reich Church. Key information, and it had instead of a pope, because so if Hitler was God in the Reich Church, the next thing would be the Pope, and this would be the Reich Bishop, and he was Ludwig Müller. The present Reich Church really, the Reich Church was known as having a group of Protestant churches. It followed this new Nazi doctrine, but the actual Reich Church was formed when these churches joined together in 1936. They had this new doctrine of positive Christianity, more compatible with Nazism. More on that later. And according to Hitler, you couldn't be a Christian and a German at the same time, because how dare you be both? How dare you? So policies towards the church. What was the Reich Church? Hitler believed this idea of positive Christianity. He was raised Catholic, but then broke away. His childhood was no good. There was no real coherence, and he also said to, I'm quoting by the way, stamp out Christianity in root and branch. One is either a Christian or a German. You can't be both. well, I mean, and the reason is because, well, Jesus Christ, was a Jew. And oh my God, how dare people worship a Jew? Oh my God, disgusting, horrible, how dare they? Like, come on, like, stupid. Yeah, well, the Borman Heydrich, he wanted complete reform, and he disliked atheists. He disliked the fact that Jesus was a Jew, and well, you have to be like Aryan and like follow this. You can be a convert. You have to be fully Aryan. It's like if you were a Jew and then you converted to like the right church, you couldn't do that because you were once a Jew. Like once a Jew, always a Jew. So you couldn't convert. You had to be Aryan from birth. That's kind of like winning the lottery, I guess. So they created this new unified Protestant Right Church under Bishop Muller. And in 1936, they encouraged like the NSLB to not teach religion in schools. Then 1937, like I mentioned, in the Catholic Church, 200 priests were like arrested for heresy trafficking. Also, they banned crosses from schools, and then they reinstated it because of the public outcry. Whatever. And then, well, a church succession campaign was implemented to try and persuade renouncing of Christianity, because only 5% were God believers, and if you were only one of those 5%, well, you're below the rest of us Aryan Germans, so like, get on our level, that kind of stuff. And if you want to be a member of the Nazi Party, you cannot hold any office as high ranking or low ranking as, like, you can hold any office in any other churches. So, well, evidence the Nazis succeeded in controlling it, so evidence the right church was successful. There's no real evidence that the right church wasn't successful, because it was like Nazi policy. So, well, Nazis supported Protestant groups and demanded cleansing of gospels in any un-German themes. German Christians had the swastika on our breast and God in our heart. God being like Hitler, I guess. And Horst Wessel, he was a martyr. So, in terms of the right church, you can't really say that they controlled it successfully because it was official Nazi policy. So, like I said, Catholic Church, kind of a failure. Protestant Church are a huge failure. Like, come on. The Confessional Church broke off. Like, you can't argue that it wasn't a failure. So, did the Nazis succeed in bringing the church under Volksgemeinschaft? No. The Reich Church was kind of undermined by the fact that the Confessional Church broke off in 1935. And then the Catholic Church, the fact that there was still opposition, they failed in bringing the church into Volksgemeinschaft. They just weren't successful at all. So, last but not least, the Nazi women, like Nazi policies towards women. So, you have the three Ks. I'd say the KKK, because it's not the KKK like the American like Ku Klux Klan one, but it's still three Ks, and it's still not really racist, but sexist, so the sexist KKK, I guess. So there's three of them. You have Kinder, meaning children, and it's to produce children, and like women should produce children, raise them with Nazi values, so they could then be donated to the Führer. Not like actually giving the child to Hitler and say, hey, there you go, here's a child. No. Like, they would then join the Hitler Youth, and they would then join the German army, and then serve for the 1,000-year-old Reich. Then you have, I'm probably pronouncing these horribly, but then Kutscher, or how you say it, and that is kitchen. This idea was to produce food for the husband and the family, if only the husband would work. And 1937, 1939, women work rose from 5.9 to 6.9 million. However, women workers went from 37% of the population to 31%. And then, and the third case, Kirche, meaning church. And women were encouraged to keep traditional Protestant values and don't worship God. No. worship Hitler. So join the Reich Church. So in terms of physical appearance, you have to be, if you want to be an Aryan woman, you have to be Aryan, strong, have the ability at the hips to bear Aryan children, simple clothing, usually German cotton because no other kind is suitable. You have to be a housewife. You couldn't drink, you couldn't smoke because then that would damage your ability to have children, and that would lead you to not being able to serve the Reich properly. You couldn't wear makeup, and because Aryan women are naturally beautiful. And well, if you had a hereditary disease or considered asocial, you would be sterilized. So as a result of this, 375,000 women were sterilized. So, in terms of groups and institutions, because women did have some groups and institutions, so trying to bring them into the Nazi ideology, you have two. The National Socialist Womanhood Group, or the NSF. I know there's a lot of letters. And then the German Workers' Enterprise, the DFW. So just to sum up the letters, you have the BDM, then you have the DAF, the BDM, so that's the Women's League, I guess. Then you have the DAF, that's the German Labor Front, the RAD, the Reich Labor Service, KDF, Strength Through Joy, SDA, Beauty Through Labor, and NSF, National Socialist Womanhood Group, and DFW is the German Women's Enterprise. There's a lot, I know. Both had their leader being Gertrude Schulze Klink. And, in the NSF, they had 2.3 million members. And it was the Nazi women wing, but they had no real political power. Then the DFW was compulsory for any women organizations. If you run a women organization or were a member of a women organization, you had to join the DFW. It was an assured women had these beliefs. Of course, women could have beliefs. Don't worry, women could have beliefs as long as they were in line with Nazi beliefs. Because God forbid, they had different beliefs. And if you didn't join and you were discovered, your group could be either restricted or straight up banned. And then comes the big one with women, marriage and children. So, in terms of marriage and children, in 1920s, children were decreasing. And this is because, the birth rates did increase in the beginning, but then they decreased because women could work now. And so the careers took over, and they were now busy and couldn't really care for children, so they didn't have children. And some also got sterilized. It's an excuse to get divorced. One of the policies the Nazis implemented to try and promote women having children, was the Honor Cross. There were four medals that they had the bronze level for children. If you had 4 children, you would receive the Bronze Honor Cross. Then, if you had 6 children, you would receive six children, you would receive the Silver Honor Cross. And if you had 8 children, you would receive the Gold Honor Cross. And then you have the marriage loans. So these were loans of 600 Reichsmarks with no interest. So you had to pay 600 Reichsmarks, and that's it. However, for every child you had, you didn't have to pay 25%. So you had 4 children, you didn't have to pay anything. That's it. So it incentivized women to have more children. And then we have the last name, the Lebensborn program. So it was established in 1935 by Heinrich Himmler, and it was inside the SS. And it also involved members of the SS, in which they would have children with women of the program. Some even had it in castles. It's kind of crazy. And the program was really called Fountain of Life. And they ended up producing 8,000 children in Germany and 12,000 in Norway. 60% of the women involved in these programs were unmarried, and they had the birth in maternity homes. 10 of these facilities were in Germany. And these women were allowed to keep the baby for around 2 weeks, but then the babies would be given to a racially pure family, because if the family was, because it's like an SS, and a woman. So if a family could have children, if it's a completely Aryan family, but they can have children from whatever reason, this baby would be given to them. Only 40% of the women in the program were racially pure. But I think they were more concerned in producing indoctrinated children than in racial purity, so that's why they didn't really bother. In 1939, they also had this new program to kidnap babies, in which they kidnapped like around 100,000, which is horrible. And well, if people didn't collaborate in these programs and in these like kidnapping babies, they would be sent to concentration camps. And that is women and the entirety of the Volksgemeinschaft topic. So in terms of how successful they were in bringing women under Volksgemeinschaft, I'd say really successful. I don't think there's any real opposition towards the policy of women under Volksgemeinschaft, so I'd say the women were like the most successful implementation of Volksgemeinschaft. So the question is, how successful were the Nazis in implementing Volksgemeinschaft in the years 1933 to 1941, I guess? So I'd say, I'd argue that they were overall successful. So my first point would be women. My strongest point is definitely women. There's no real opposition. Really, no opposition. My second point would be education, and probably my first one would be women. Women, and then the second part would be youth, so education and youth groups. Then my counter argument would be the church. So in terms of women, I would argue that there was no real opposition to like the 3Ks or the Lebensborn program or the Honor Cross, marriage loans, and then the DFW and the DFW and the like two. Wait, let me just check again the organization. Yeah, the DFW and the NSF. There was no real opposition to those. The DFW did have 6 million members. The NSF had 2.3 million. So just a whole paragraph on women. The next paragraph would be the youth. So half of the paragraph would be education, the stress on eugenics, the love for the reestablishment of the professional civil service, affecting the laws and affecting the laws on teachers, and the removal of Catholic influences in the schools, universities, how the membership and blah blah blah. And then another part of the same paragraph talking about the youth group, so the BDM and the Hitler Youth and how successful it was. And you have to say how it wasn't really how it wasn't as significant as the women. And then you would mention the swinging jazz groups, the Edelweiss Pirates, yeah. And then in my disagree paragraph and disagree point, I would definitely say the church and maybe the workers. The church definitely, and the workers, that's more like you have So Paid, the White Rose, White Rose. I always forget the White Rose is in the universities, but Harold Libertas. So I would join maybe workers and the church in one paragraph. So the Confessional Church definitely how this the Strength to Joy cruises were a scam, really, and how there was opposition, because under women there was no real opposition to it. There's no group that actively opposed these policies. So yeah, that is the debate on Volksgemeinschaft. I hope you found it useful, and yeah, I'm not gonna say anything else because there's nothing else to say. So yeah, I hope you found it useful and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.